And joining us now is Democratic Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois. She's a member of the Armed Services Committee, the Committee on Foreign Relations, and an Iraq war veteran. Thank you so much, Senator, for joining us first on this solemn day. And as someone who has personally been wounded and has lost friends in battle, I want to get your thoughts about what we're about to witness as these fallen soldiers return home.
Well, you're going to see a terrible beauty. It's how I've always described these moments, whether it is the dignified transfer or ceremony at Arlington Cemetery. I'm heartbroken for the three service members, Sergeants Rivers, Sanders, and Moffitt, as well as their families. But you're going to see them brought home to their loved ones so that they can be laid to rest and be receiving of the thanks of our grateful nation for their service and sacrifice.
The U.S. believes an umbrella group of Iranian-backed militias known as the Islamic Resistance in Iraq is responsible for their deaths. So let's talk about the response. You have said the message we send to Iran must make war less likely, not more. So what would that look like? What kind of response?
I think we need to have a very strong response, and we need to target these groups. Iran has been reckless in its funding over years and decades now of all of these Iranian proxy groups all over the Middle East, and they're wreaking havoc everywhere. And in fact, they've lost control of these groups. And I think they were quite surprised by this attack themselves. So I think we need to have a very strong response. We need to go after the groups. If we can identify which ones in particular were responsible for these attacks, we need to retaliate. But I also caution that in our retaliation, we don't bring ourselves to the cusp of spiraling into another war in the Middle East. That is not something that we want as a nation. And certainly we would not want to be putting more troops in harm's way by starting us on a path towards war.
But is it a fine line? I know you've been critical of your Republican colleagues who have called for striking Iran directly. Iran has warned it would hit back. But what do you think Iran would do?
Well, I can't tell you what Iran would do. I think that it depends on the type of attack that we mount. Initial reports suggest that what the president is planning is well thought out, that it is going to be a strong response aimed at deterring Iran from supporting further attacks on U.S. troops without risking that escalation that I'm worried about that could lead us into yet another war in the Middle East. What we need to not do is start us on the path towards war. Now, I do think we need to go after these terrorists, and as we have done with the Hamas fighters, as we have done with retaliatory strikes on other groups, I think that that's what the president should do. But again, we have to be very careful how we respond, and so that we are not in danger of escalating to a full-blown war.
The U.S. has already been conducting some targeted strikes, in particular against the Houthis in Yemen, and it has not deterred them. These groups largely seem emboldened. So why haven't they been deterred?
Well, some of them have, as you mentioned earlier. There is a mixed response from them. I think we continue to need to retaliate in a very strong way, and we need to take some of these groups out. But remember that the responsibility for this lies with Iran. Iran itself, from reports that I've seen, were surprised by some of these attacks. Recently, I believe one of the groups used ballistic missiles, for example, that Iran indicated that Iran was surprised that they used ballistic missiles. So we need to continue to strike back, but we need to do this in a very strong way to send that message to Iran to get control of these proxy groups and make sure that you remain control over them. And let's not escalate towards war by attacking more U.S. service members.
Do you have any concern that the Biden administration hasn't responded more forcefully or more swiftly since the deadly attack in Jordan?
Well, I don't have concerns with that because I understand that they are planning a very strong series of attacks. And from what I can discuss here, it appears to be a very well thought out surgical way of responding that will be aimed at deterring Iran.
The chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, your fellow Democratic Senator Ben Cardin, says that he believes President Biden should come to Congress for a new authorization for military action. Do you believe the White House should seek congressional approval for additional military action? Where's the line on that?
Well, so there is a line that is approximately 90 days from the initial responses. That'll happen sometime, I believe, in March or April. I do think that if the president does continue to move forward with responses that there is a need to bring an authorization for use of military force to the floor of the Senate. And this is what I say to my Republican colleagues who are calling for us to take it to Tehran. Some of them say, well, if you want to attack Tehran, then let's have that conversation on the floor of the Senate. Let's show, a tiny percentage of the bravery that our troops are showing in harm's way by having that discussion on the floor of the Senate. And then let's have a vote. You want to attack Iran? Then let's have a vote on the floor of the Senate. And let's have the guts of our convictions and have that discussion. And if need be, then vote for it. But to call for attacks, taking it to Tehran and having these very reckless statements, I don't think helps the situation. But there is a process for the president to come forward. He's in a time period right now that he can continue to retaliate. He's able to do this because American troops were directly attacked. But I'm also going to be calling for the president to come to the United States Senate should this continue further than the 90 days.